Hey, what's up, everybody?
What's going on?
This is Tony.
And I'm Jenny.
And we are Lido Loca, and these are 10 questions you should probably answer before you go on a cruise. Alright, folks, we're back. Maybe a little different kind of video. We've been asking each other, what are the things you should know before you go cruising? Really looking for tips and hacks that could help the first-time cruiser, but I think maybe a few things that could help people that are seasoned cruisers that are just catching their stride when it comes to cruising. Please check through all these questions and leave a comment below. Tell us at the bottom what are something that we might have missed, or what's a question you may ask yourself before you go cruising. We've been at this cruising for about 16, 17 months. We've been on 4 cruises in the last year and a half. And I know on our first cruise, we just kind of threw ourselves into it. Mm-hmm. We did a little bit of research. We read some things on the internet. We watched some videos. And I don't know that we answered all these questions. So, Jenny, I've written down 10 questions. I'm going to throw them out there. We can talk about them, and then I'll edit it down to maybe what could be helpful to people.
Okay.
Most of the time we do all that in advance, but we thought we would show you a little bit what it looks like and how we kind of process some of this information, because there might be something helpful even in the way we process it.
That's right.
All right. So I'm trying to go back and think as if I'm a new cruiser. So the first question I wrote down is, what is the best destination for the time of year that I'm cruising? So imagine I'm a brand new cruiser and I have some time off in August, and I want to go on a cruise. What's the best place to go? How would I even know? Is every place the best place to go, or are some places better than the other?
I think some places are better than the other, but like our thought process with most people is, I want to go to a hot destination, mm-hmm. Temperature-wise. And so that brings you to the Caribbean, of course. But as we experienced, maybe that's not the best place to go during the summer because it is so hot.
Right.
You know, it's hot here in the United States, but it's super hot in the Caribbean and that powerful sun. So why not think about an Alaskan cruise at that time, or maybe the coast of Canada?
Yeah.
Those kind of cruises.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I didn't realize in the beginning, is that there are options. The other thing we didn't know in the beginning is what the official months for hurricane season are.
Right.
And hurricane season officially, I believe, runs June all the way to November. Mm-hmm. But it seems like the height of the season really kind of ramps up September, October.
Absolutely.
And so, when you're trying to decide, some people just have certain times off for their vacation. They want to go to the Caribbean, hurricane season or not, heat or not, they're going to go down there. But I think it is good to know that there are options for cruising. Now, Alaska does have a kind of a bookended cruise season because of the way the winter comes in.
Right.
And I wrote down a note that June through August is really kind of the prime time to go to Alaska. And so if you want to maybe escape the summertime heat, go to Alaska. And then, like Jenny said, you can go up into Canada. There's cruises that leave out of the East Coast that go into Canada, cruises that leave out of the West Coast and go through Canada up into Alaska. And then another interesting thing is, if you're going to cruise during the fall, it's a great time to go to the Caribbean. But that's also a really good time to go to Canada because of the leave changes. Mm-hmm. So it really just depends what you're looking for. But honestly, you're not stuck just going to one place based on the time of year that you're going. So when you determine what month you want to travel, start looking around and kind of look outside the box and say, okay, I know most cruises go to the Caribbean, but are there other places that I could go that might fit your needs better? So
yeah, and also I was doing some research on a Mediterranean Italy cruise, mm-hmm. and those months are also different also.
Yeah.
So over there, the best time to go, they're saying, is like May and October.
Yeah.
Which is, so it's really, you really have to do your kind of research on that.
Yeah, so, hopefully the thing that comes through this whole video is cruising is an awesome way to vacation, mm-hmm. But depending on when you want to go, it could take you to a lot of different places.
That's right.
All right. Question number 2, what cruise line best fits your personality? I don't think I realized in the beginning that cruise lines had personality traits.
Right.
So how would you answer that question? How do you figure out what cruise line best fits your personality?
First of all, I think that you should try them all.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, we started out with one and had a fantastic time, absolutely, but then went on a different line and really enjoyed ourselves.
Exactly.
And they're polar opposite.
Yeah, it's funny. Both of those cruise lines are owned by the same parent company, but a very distinctive cruising experience. And that's really what made us realize that cruise lines do have different personality. Mm-hmm. There are some cruise lines that are more family friendly, some that are more geared toward people who like good food experiences. There's some that are geared toward more of a luxury clientele. There are some that are geared toward just adults that want to go off and do their own thing. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking for your cruise line, what I would suggest is just do a Google search. If you put in personality of cruise lines, there are many articles that will describe the different personality of cruise lines. And of course, you know yourself better than anybody else. And so I would suggest trying to find a cruise line that matches up to your personality. If you really want a cruise line that kind of fits your personality, you can do some research on the front end. And then once you have a few names of cruise lines, I would suggest go to like YouTube and YouTube people that have been on there. You can watch the folks and kind of understand what their personality is like and see what cruise lines they chose. And then beyond just watching the people, you can actually look at the cruise lines and kind of understand what the atmosphere is. And, that way you can try to match up your personality to the cruise that you're going on. Number 3, what cruise line best fits your budget?
That's a good one.
It's a big one, right? So we've had this conversation. Do we like to cruise based on the ship? Do we like to cruise based on where the ship is going? Do we like to cruise based on where the ship is going from? Or do we just like to cruise where we can afford it?
That's right.
And so of those 4 things, you have to really figure out what has the highest priority. I know when we're trying to cruise quickly, when we haven't spent a lot of time saving for a cruise or planning a cruise way in advance, a lot of times the cruise line that fits our budget is our favorite cruise line.
That's right.
And so, again, the cool thing about cruising, it's a highly competitive business. Traditionally, people will tell you that Carnival has the cheapest prices. But if you shop around and if you are diligent looking for the cheapest price, you can find very competitive prices across all the cruise lines.
Absolutely. We research a lot. And, we found a lot of luxury liners that were actually cheaper.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So one way that you can approach planning for your cruise is you can just say, look, I have X amount of dollars to spend. Let me just go search for cruises that meet that criteria, and then you can choose from there. So it's really budget's a big factor, and so you have to determine on the front end what your budget's going to be for cruising. And there's a lot of additional cost. The cost to travel to the cruise port, money for souvenirs, money for gambling, money for what you're going to do in the port. So make sure when you're trying to determine what your cruise budget is, you think about some of those variables other than just the published price on the cruise website or what your travel agent might tell you. Think about all those other things, because there's nothing worse than going on vacation and being stressed out by money.
That's right.
All right, Jenny. So the next question related to your budget is also, what kind of cabin do you want to cruise in?
Right. I think that has to do with a lot of your budget, right?
Right.
So I know for us, interior, well, for everybody really, interior is much cheaper. Mm-hmm. And I say that loosely because a lot of times they do have specials on, if you get a balcony, you get this kind of incentive. So really look into that as well. You can get a balcony, say, on one of the cruise lines that comes with a bottle of wine and 2 specialty dinings. So is that equivalent to what your savings is in the interior? So there's a lot of things that go into choosing what cabin style you want. Yeah,
you said a lot there that made me think of a few things. So first, just to give some sort of outline for the new cruisers, there's a few major cabin types. There's a suite or junior suite, and we'll go from what I feel like is most expensive to least expensive. So suite, junior suite, balcony, ocean view, and then an interior. And those all really are factors that will increase or decrease your price.
Right.
But the other thing that you said is when you're trying to figure out your total cost of cruising, try to figure out what's included. And so if you're going on a cruise line that has, say, maybe a really inexpensive cabin rate, but they don't include anything like onboard credit, or, you know, some cruise lines are including free drink packages now. That's
also priority boarding.
Priority boarding. That's a huge factor. And so say you find a cabin that's $500 per person that doesn't include drinks, but then there's another cabin on what's perceived a more expensive line that has the same cabin type for $600, but it includes your drinks for the week.
Right.
Well, that's a big savings, because you more than likely, if you consume alcohol, you're going to spend more than $100 in a week on the cruise ship. So
Absolutely.
I don't think they try to make it tricky on purpose, but you need to go in with an open mind and ask yourself, you know, we try to write down a little list. What are the costs? You know, like when we're picking out our cruise, okay, like Jenny will tell me a cost, and I'll be like, well, is that the all-in cost? Is there port fees? Are there gratuities that we need to add? Is there any? And so it's, you know, the other cool thing, there's a lot coming out of this question. The other cool thing is to be able to do planning with somebody, and then that way you can kind of push back and forth off of each other to make sure that you've answered all the questions.
Right.
I'll go ahead and plug the Lido Loca cruising community. If you don't have somebody to bounce back and forth off the, you know, those kind of questions, come join us on Facebook. We've got about 3,000 cruisers over there that are happy to answer questions, and we have these conversations a lot. Oh, I'm
Absolutely,
thinking about this. Is this worth it, or is that not worth it? So come on over to Facebook, join us there, and we can continue the conversation. But yeah, so you got to, you know, determine what kind of cabin type that you want. And then the next question that you have to ask yourself once you know what that cabin is, where is that cabin located on the cruise ship?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you are prone to motion sickness, you want to pick a cabin that's going to minimize the amount of motion that you have. You may even want to pick a ship size that that minimizes the motion. What we've heard from people is that the larger ships move less. Right. And you're less prone to motion sickness. And then also, when you're picking out your cabin, maybe the middle or the higher part of the ship eliminates motion, and being in the middle of the ship eliminates motion. So middle is what we normally tell people. Mid. So Jenny, what are some other factors when you're trying to choose your room and trying to decide where on the cruise ship to put your room? What are some other things that you think about?
I also think about, are they near the elevator? Are they near, like where we like to frequent, you know, say the theater, the casino? How far is it from the Lido deck? Different things go into where I want to be. You know, I don't want to be under the disco if I know we're not going to go there that night.
Right.
You know, at the night. Yeah, there's a lot of different little things that go into what my thought process is to pick a cabin.
All right, so this is what I do when I get to pick the cabin, or when Jenny says, what room do you think you want to be in, what cabin? I go to the ship that we're going to sail on. I look up the deck plan, and normally, here's the other thing. All the rooms, so I told you about the 4 major types of rooms, 5 suites, junior suites, balcony, interior, and ocean view. The cruise lines give each one of those room types a category, and then even in those room types, there'll be multiple categories depending on where that room is on the cruise ship. And so when we're thinking about, when we know what kind of price point we want to go for, we also know what the category of the room is. And then you can take that category and go look at the deck plans of the cruise ship and see where those are.
Right.
And so once I know kind of which rooms I'm looking at, I will look for things like, are there rooms above me and rooms below me, opposed to like the buffet? Or I'm always looking for a room that there's a room above me, a room below me, and a room on each side of me, because I feel like those are going to be the least noisy rooms.
Right.
Now, you could have bad luck and you could have a neighbor that's completely out of control. But for the most part, I think a couple or a family above you is going to be more quiet than, say, the kitchen galley.
That's right.
So that's one thing I look at. And then, not that I'm superstitious, but I like even numbers over odd numbers. And so I will even go to the point of trying to find an even number cruise cabin that meets those criteria.
Yes, he does. Believe me, folks.
So you can do it any way that you want to do, but that's the way I do it. I don't know if anybody else is that crazy about it, but that's kind of my picking process. All right, Jenny, since we're talking a little bit about the booking process, another question that you have to ask yourself is, how do you want to pay for your cruise?
Right. There's lots of different ways, right? You can pay by gift cards from the cruise lines. Most of the cruise lines have their own credit card that you can get onboard credit. There's also, reward credit cards. And I mean, people do still do just their debit card or a check or stuff like that. But I think it's good to figure out what rewards you're going to get on different cards, and some of the cards even have travel insurance.
Right. That was the interesting thing. So the first cruise that we went on, we just whipped out our debit card and we paid for it. Now, as time went on, we got exposed to credit cards, and we'd say make sure that you can use credit responsibly before you do something like this. But the major cruise lines offer credit cards which give you rebates and onboard credit. You could consider those things, but when it comes time to booking your cruise, at least when you book it with a travel agent or book it online, you're going to need some sort of debit or credit card to book that. But to your point, you can also use the gift cards.
That's right.
Can you book with gift cards?
Absolutely.
So you can book with gift cards. But then the other thing when it comes to paying for your cruise, the thing I didn't realize in the beginning is I thought I just had to pay for it all at once, right? And so all of a sudden I'm going on a $2,000 cruise. I thought I had to have all that at once. It really would hold me back from cruising because I'm like, I don't want to lay out that kind of money. Most cruise lines, and if you book in advance, there's going to be some sort of deposit system. The deposits usually run between $250 to $500, but most of the cruise lines also will run specials with reduced deposits.
That's right.
And so
get you in the door.
Normally, it depends on the cruise line, but anywhere between 60 and 90 days before you cruise, that's when you have to pay your cruise off. So imagine if you book a cruise 2 years in advance, it gives you 2 years to pay for that cruise. And so it really is an easy way that if you can set aside money each month, you can get on a cycle where you can cruise frequently because you're just making a cruise payment. Now, the interesting thing about deposits, especially when you get a reduced deposit, a lot of times those deposits are non-refundable.
Yes.
So I think a good rule of thumb is if you're paying an expensive deposit, $250, $500, there's a good chance you'll be able to get that back for the most part. But if you're paying like a $25 deposit or a $50 deposit, those deposits are probably non-refundable. So keep those things in mind when you're going for the early savers or the cheap booking, that kind of thing. Most of the time there's some sort of restriction that if you have to change your plans, you cannot get your deposit back. But a lot of times you can ensure that your deposit is refundable by paying a full price or a more high price deposit.
Correct.
That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
And make sure you pay your cruise off on time, because if you do not, they will cancel your reservation and you'll get the money back, but you won't be booked on the cruise.
And only a percentage of your money.
That's right. We talked about a lot of things already, but the last few questions really kind of hopefully tie it all together. The first thing, a question you should ask yourself is not only what cruise line you want to go on that fits your personality, but also where do you want to go? Where do you want to go in the world?
Right. Well, and that's true, right? So, did you always want to go to Aruba? Did you always want to go sail in Italy? Or, the world is like just at your fingertips. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so when we first started cruising, I thought that cruising was only something that happened down to the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. That's all I knew. I mean, I think I knew about Alaska cruises, but since we've had this exposure, I mean, there's cruises to Alaska. You can cruise through the Panama Canal. You can go to Australia and cruise up into Asia. You can go to the UK and cruise back over to New York. You can go to the Mediterranean and cruise all around the Mediterranean.
And river cruises all through Europe. They're just amazing.
Yeah, it's a very wide open vacation type. And so when you're thinking about cruising, don't just limit yourself to thinking about the Caribbean. That is one of the more popular destinations. I would encourage everybody to go to the Caribbean.
Absolutely.
But if fun in sun is not necessarily, or if in the sun fun is not necessarily your favorite kind of fun, and you like to go on scenic tours, and there's a lot of different options. So, but you have to answer that question, where do you want to go? And then another question you have to answer is, how far do you have to go to get to the ship? One thing I did shortly after we started cruise, so the first cruise that we went on, we live in North Carolina. We went all the way to Alabama to get on our first cruise ship.
That's right.
That was not the closest cruise port. We had some other circumstances that made us want to go to Alabama. But when we came back from that cruise, I made out a little list and plotted it on the map. There are cruises that leave out of South Carolina. There are cruises that leave, all kinds of cruises that leave out of Florida. There's cruises that leave out of Alabama. There's cruises that leave out of Louisiana. There's cruises that leave out of Texas. There's cruises that leave out of California. There's cruises that leave out of Maryland. There's cruises that leave out of New York. And that's just in the U.S.
That's right.
And so one of the things you might want to do is kind of like see where the closest cruise ports are and see how many ships are there. You might be happy to cruise on the same cruise ship over and over from the same port, and if it's super close to you, I could see doing that.
Absolutely.
But you might be in a great place to where you can go the same amount of distance to go to a variety of cruise ports, and it opens up a whole variety of ships to you.
Right, and then it also gets to the point like, all right, so if I want to go to a bigger ship, I am going to have to budget in hotel stay and food stay and travel, you know.
Travel time.
The travel time, right.
Yeah, that would be a bonus that we throw in here. If you hadn't thought about it, we never really recommend flying in the day of your cruise. I know some people do it, and sometimes you're constrained by time that you have to do it. But airfare is one of those things that can easily get delayed. And unless you booked your airfare through the cruise line, the ship won't wait for you. So say you're just on a regular Southwest flight, you're coming in at 7 a.m., and for some reason that flight doesn't happen and you can't fly in until 4 or 5 o'clock, you're going to miss the ship.
That's right.
And so we say mitigate that risk of air delay by coming in the day early. So to Jenny's point, you got to factor all that in.
You do.
So for us, we've yet to sail out of Charleston, which is our closest cruise port.
We have not yet.
I would like to do that. All right, and just another quick one is, are there anything that would limit your ability to cruise? Do you have any physical limitations? The cruise lines are really good at accommodating disabilities. The one thing that came to mind, though, is there are some restrictions on cruising when pregnant.
Right.
I know there was a recent news story of a lady that had to be medevaced because her pregnancy kicked off in the middle of the cruise. Most cruise lines, what is it, 24 weeks?
I'm not positive.
Yeah, check with your cruise line. It's somewhere in that. It's very specific. I really do think it's if you are 24 weeks or 24 weeks or more in your pregnancy, they don't recommend you cruising. But check with your cruise line because you don't want to be denied boarding because you're too pregnant. And there was a very popular story about that also. So just to throw that out there, Jenny. But a couple more big questions. How are you going to book your cruise? Is there only one way to book your cruise?
No, you could. There's multiple ways, right? Like you can book directly through the cruise line.
Yeah.
You can book through like a big box kind of place. You can book through a travel agent. What other ways?
Yeah, so
those are the three ways, really.
You know, with your cruise line and your travel agent, you can normally book online or on the telephone.
That's right.
And you can do it all yourself. So you can look up your cruises. You can see what the prices are on your cruises by going through the cruise line of your choice. If you have a travel agent, this is what we recommend from a travel agent perspective. We've used a couple travel agents. We haven't really known them very well, and so you don't really get the warm fuzzies unless you have a relationship with your travel agent.
Right.
So I would say that if you're going to book travel through a travel agent, try to use somebody you have a relationship with. I think you get the most out of that you get the most benefit that way because that person's kind of going to have skin in the game for you, that kind of thing. We had a really poor experience with a big box travel agent, one of like the discount stores that sell travel. It wasn't good. But then we've also booked our cruises directly with the cruise line, and those were fine experiences. The way you book your cruise and how you plan for your cruise, it really is personal preference.
Absolutely.
If you're somebody that likes to plan a lot, likes to do a lot of research, I would say book on your own or at least pull all the information together. If you're somebody that likes to have somebody help you get the answers where you can just say, hey, I just want to do this, make a plan for me, I would say book with a travel agent. And there's just a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah, and what's also kind of cool is that I know that a lot of people like to plan their own vacation. And, really a travel agent is there to help guide you or just help you, in any way that you need. But what's kind of cool is that most cruise lines, you can do all of the investigating, all of the research that you want to do, book your cruise, and then you can always transfer it to a travel agent for extra incentive.
Yeah, and so if you've been around Lido Loca at all, you know that Jenny and I have gone through this process of trying to learn the travel business by doing travel agent stuff, helping people with their travel. And so we are big advocates for using a travel agent. So if you do want some help, though, you can check with us. We'll be glad to help you out. And like Jenny said, if you want to do all the work on your own and you'd still like to check with a travel agent and see if there's any additional benefits that you could get, there's no extra cost. Reach out to Jenny. She is the best. She always gets a good deal on our travel, and she's my favorite travel agent. The final thing that we want to say, the question that you have to ask yourself is, okay, you've decided all these other things. You know where you're going to go. You know what cruise line you're going to go on. The only major thing that can hang you up is whether or not you have the right travel documentation.
Absolutely.
So the first thing you want to do as soon as you book your cruise, and sometimes travel documentation takes 6 weeks, 12 weeks. So you got to think about this early on. Where you're going, does it require a passport, or can you just go with your normal birth certificate, state issued ID? For many of the ports in the Caribbean, that's all you need, just like your birth certificate and your state-issued ID. But there are some ports. So we went to Cuba last year.
Right.
We would not have been able to get into Cuba with just our birth certificate and our state-issued ID. We actually needed a passport. So when you're planning your travel, you need to be able to answer that question, and you need to know whether you have the proper documentation.
Right. And on that note, that's a good point that you brought up. When you are going out of the country and you have to have your passports, also take into consideration that those visas cost money.
Yeah, so some countries require, I heard somebody call it a tax the other day, a tax to get into the country. Mm-hmm. I guess that is one way of looking at it.
Right.
Back when I used to travel for business, I had a trip planned to China, and I did have to pay a couple $100 and send my passport off to get a Chinese visa in it.
Right.
And the same thing when we went to Cuba, we had to pay $80 each to be allowed to go into Cuba. And so sometimes that's the cost of doing business, that's the cost of going and visiting a place. So make sure that's another cost to bake into whether or not you need a passport to go somewhere, and whether that country requires a visa. So things to be aware of, know what kind of documentation that you need. That might be like one of the ways that you decide where you want to cruise. Hey, I know I'm only going to have my state-issued ID and my birth certificate. Mm-hmm. Where do I want to go? And if you're like most of us, I never know where my birth certificate is. And so when we went on the first cruise...
I don't know where it is right now.
When we went on the first cruise, Jenny didn't have her passport. And so one of the things we had to figure out pretty quick was, how do we get a copy of Jenny's birth certificate?
Yeah.
And so those are some things to consider. And yeah, I think that's 10 questions that you should ask yourself. There's probably a few more things in there, and I'm sure there's more things we didn't cover.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so all you seasoned travelers, please add to that list. Let's keep the conversation going. And I think this is kind of a good way, a good thing that you can follow to decide how you want to book your cruise.
Absolutely, you guys. Yeah, I think that it's great. And like you said, there's going to be so many people that can add the little tidbits to just help everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's extend the community through the comments. Let's continue on the conversation. If you found this information helpful, hit that like button. Help us out so that we know to keep making this kind of conversational type content. And all of our social media is linked in the description below. We'd love for you to come and join us at any of those places. Be a part of the Loca fam. And if you're new here, welcome aboard. And my name's Tony.
And I'm Jenny.
And until the next time,
we'll see you on the Lido.
We'll see you on the Lido.
Bye.
Bye.